Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
Chris?
Hey, what's up, man? Welcome to 420. It's episode 420, bro. How you doing? Yeah. Okay.
Man's been lobbying for this moment. I'm starting to regret I didn't know you in your 20s. It might have been interesting.
Actually, you know what? I wasn't really big on that stuff in my 20s.
Yeah.
I was, you could buy a nickel bag or you could buy almost 2 albums. If you went to Harmony Records in the Bronx, you could probably buy 2 albums, maybe 3, depending on how crappy the albums were. So, I know where my addiction was.
Yep. Music.
And a lot of my friends were beer guys, so that's the way that was. But anyway.
What are we here for today?
Well, I'd like to welcome everyone to Tell the Damn Story. And we have been together, Alex and I, for 420 episodes. And like any old couple, we dress the same.
Yep, here we go again.
That's right. It's happened again, ladies and gentlemen. Just 2 old washerwomen talking over the laundry.
My people called his people. Yeah.
Alex, I'm telling you. All right, so today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about villains. Villains like the kind of villains that surreptitiously make you wear blue so your partner and you could be dressed the same. Those kind of vile villains. What we're talking about really is that you can't create villains like you did in the old days. They can't be 2-dimensional. They must be 3-dimensional. Matter of fact, the best villains, there's something you must like about them.
It helps.
And that is a neat trick. So we're going to talk about that. If you hang out for the whole episode, rather short episode, if you hang out for the whole episode, you too will leave here saying, I know how to write a villain, and I have an overwhelming need to wear a blue shirt. What's that?
And let me go out and buy 2 or 3.
Yes.
Yes. And those who are only listening to this podcast will now rush to YouTube to see the podcast so they can see how cool we look. How cool.
And they're just going to say, wow, they are 2 old washerwomen.
Yeah. There
no,
you go.
washer people. We don't want to,
right. No gender specific here.
Because here we are, 2 old farts wearing the same clothes. There you go.
So let us talk about the. So you had brought up when we were in the green room, not the blue room. You had brought up a villain that I had not thought about since last Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So why don't we start there? To give the example of what it is you meant, but I'm sorry, just to give an example of what it is you meant when you said we can't write them like they used to back in the old days.
Well, the guy I'm talking about is one of the last great 2-dimensional villains, right? And that was Silas Barnaby, who was the villain, the over-the-top villain from what was originally called Babes in Toyland, but we grew up in the New York area watching it on Channel 11 every Thanksgiving morning as March of the Wooden Soldiers.
Starring
Laurel and Hardy, of course. Yes. Laurel and Hardy, of course, and 6-foot-tall marching wooden soldiers. And the Boogeyman, which was, fantastic.
Boogeyman.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Yes. Oh, the Boogeyman. That's right. It's Bo. It's a long vowel, Chris. Yeah. I know you're from the Bronx. Practice, you'll get it.
Yeah.
So it was a very simple thing. He wanted Bo Peep, who, what?
Girl.
She was a beautiful little blonde, God bless her. And probably, the most attractive woman in Toyland. So from that perspective,
I think she was the only single woman in Toyland.
Probably only single woman. Yeah. There was the old mother who lived in the shoe, but she'd been busy for a while.
Yeah.
4,500 kids. But Bo Peep, there she was. And the oldest crime in human history is lust and domination. And there he was. Probably doesn't age well in the current atmosphere. Because,
she was also very young.
She was very young. He was not. The actor was very young, but he played older really well.
Yeah.
And, so that's all he wanted. He had the secret power because he controlled the bogeymen. He apparently was a real estate tycoon. and perhaps the president of the United States. No, wait.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he was certainly a big wheel there.
he
Yeah,
was a
in
big wheel there.
Toyland. Yeah,
Yes, he
yeah.
was. But that's all he wanted. That was the one thing. There was no, she reminds me of my wife who died in childbirth, and my heart has been broken. None of that.
No,
Zero.
no,
No
none. Zip.
humanizing factor whatsoever.
He was bad.
Uh,
He was just
we didn't feel
plain.
bad when he got hit with a what was that thing that Stan Laurel hit?
Oh, the little toggles, the little wooden
The little wood
things.
thing.
Yeah,
Boom. He
yeah,
got whapped in the head. We didn't care. We
no,
didn't care when he got ripped off at the altar. We didn't
right.
care when he got hit with a big roll of toilet paper.
We
We
were
didn't care when
cheering.
he got stomped. We were cheering when the three little pigs were hitting him with a balloon,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Because there
He
was
was
no
bad.
redeeming factors.
Yeah,
None.
yeah.
None. Now, if we jump up several generations and go to someone who's dressed very similarly and at first appears much like Silas Barnaby, Severus Snape from the Harry
Mm.
Potter stories. As those books go on, there's these little glimmers that are shown. You know, we find out he was friends with Harry's parents. And eventually we find out that he was meant to watch out for Harry, and he was pushing him to try and get him out of danger and all this. And that recalibrated everything we thought about Snape. It forced us to rethink him as a villain, to see him as having more dimensions. So that by the end, and we don't want to spoil the end because, you know, how old are those books?
Right. No one's read them, right?
Yeah. Or seen the movies, right? But the turnaround hits us in the feels because we were allowed to see another level, another layer of the onion, right?
Hmm.
Of Severus Snape. And that's what makes him work.
Let's look at that just a little bit deeper too.
Well, sure.
Because one, Barnaby rather, based in
Silas
Toyland, again,
Barnaby.
yes, played absolutely for the bad guy. He did all the wrong things for all the obvious reasons, and he was even a manipulator of the king of that realm, whispering in his ear. But Barnaby had the money. Barnaby had control of a lot of the town, and I'm not sure what the king was in charge of, except he was the king. So it was
Right.
almost like he was manipulating the royalty and the power that theoretically ruled the land there. So the king was pretty much a figurehead. Barnabas was a bad guy,
Barnaby,
pure
yeah.
and simple, pure and simple. And when he didn't get what he wanted, he got even more evil. That's fine.
Yes.
That's fine. When you look at Snape, and let us also not ignore his name, Gandalf or Harry or Hermione, there are certain names that come with a sort of gentleness to them, or we sort of accept them as average or whatever. But Snape, that actually even has a little sort of I don't know if I should trust someone named Snape. So there are
Right.
things that the writer did in terms of his attitude, his way of dealing, the way he even sat in an environment, either in the film or in the book, when he didn't speak much. Something about his presence made us suspicious or cautious or wary of him. And that was deliberate. And yet, underneath all the things that you mentioned. So you also want to think about how you want to use your villain in your stories. And back in the day, in the olden days, villains were meant to simply be
Villain.
villains. That was it.
Evil.
Yeah.
Just evil, yeah.
Good guys, bad guys. Good girls, bad girls. Simple. Very simple because that was their attitude about how society took in the information. Keep it simple. Right. But now, as you were saying, as time progressed, we get a little bit more complex. So again, you can set up your villains to look villainous
Yeah.
and untrustworthy, but then there are the layers that you're talking about.
Right. And the more layers you can put in, the richer the character becomes.
Yeah.
Let's think about Batman's villains in the 1940s, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
they first started. They were all two-dimensional. The Penguin was puns and bird puns, foul puns. The Joker was just maniacal laughter and pranks
Yeah.
The Riddler was riddles, and on it went. And then, well, that kind of lasted through the 50s and the early 60s. And then towards the end of the 60s with Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil and a few people like that. And then the 70s, other layers started happening. We started getting little insights into the Penguin. He was a mob guy and a manipulator because he couldn't possibly go up toe to toe with anybody. He was basically short and round and almost deformed at times, depending on the artist, but brilliant manipulator. Well, that gave him dimensions that he hated because of how people treated him. Dimensions. The Riddler became, rather than a walking book of riddles, became a kind of an egomaniac that had to prove himself greater than the world's greatest detective. Not
Mhm.
Sherlock, but Batman, because in Gotham, they don't really know about Sherlock.
Yeah. Who does
Uh,
Gotham? Yeah. Well,
Most interesting, and one that I think we can talk about how you can go too far. They really investigated mental illness with the Joker. Everything he saw in Batman was sanity. And his mission became to prove that he wasn't as insane as people made him out to see, that everybody was just one bad day away from being what he was.
mm.
And that drove him further and further. I think in the last 15 or 20 years, they've gone too far, which is an interesting thing. Can you round out or layer a character to a villain so much that it collapses under its own weight? I think when a character cuts off its own face and staples it back on, you have arrived there because you can no longer relate at all or understand the psychosis that drives the Joker when he cuts off his own face and staples it back on. There was a period before that where, oh, who was his girlfriend for a while? Jeez.
Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn, that romance there, that was a fascinating dance of neuroses and bouncing off each other, and how he pulled people in to his psychosis was fascinating. But when you go much further than that, you break the fascination because you shatter the believability, the illusion. You got to suspend your disbelief. Some things become just nope.
Well, I think part of that, it does depend on a couple of factors that, oddly enough, have little or anything to do with the characters, because part of that is what is the mindset, and I'm even going to say the marketing mindset or the ego mindset of creators and publishers at a particular time. I think that one of the things that has happened in media, and I'm not going to say yay or nay on it, I'm just going to state it, that can you top this became the game, became the
Yep.
big name of the game,
Yeah.
and so if you have a slasher film in 1999 that did great dollars and cents, then the next film's got to top that, and the next film's got to top that, and
Right.
so you get the sequels of things. Okay, well, we got to go even more extreme in that, and I think the same thing happened in comics and in some novels, but since we're using comics and pop culture right now, the same thing happened with a number of the characters where, again, what can we do with Batman? Batman started out as a tragic figure. He saw his parents killed. It did have an effect on him. And his original projection was, I'm going to become a protector. I'm going to
Yeah.
go out there and make sure that it doesn't happen. And if we look at 1939, yes, here I am in my Wayback Machine. If we look at 1939, 1940, Batman was dangerous at that point, and the Joker was dangerous. The Joker killed in the early part of his career in the late 1930s, early 1940s. He poisoned people with this Joker serum or venom that they died, right? And then as the years and the comics code and things started to have an effect, they calm that out. Get the violence, get the ugly violence out, and just make him this trickster. And then eventually, yes, in somewhere in the 70s or so, we started to come back to it. But what was happening in
Yeah,
the 60s and 70s, we were also starting to cover more quote unquote adult material, getting more
right.
extreme in subject matter, violence, language, all of that.
Yeah.
So I
And
think,
one would say that Marvel pushed DC to go more there
well, yeah,
because Marvel's approach was more layered characters,
yeah, but even
before that.
even there, like I, for instance, and again, folks, we are talking about villains. I enjoyed the fact that what Marvel did was Marvel said comics are no longer just another world or the other world. It could happen in our world. So when you took Peter Parker and you put him not just in a city, in New York City, and not just in New York City, but in a particular neighborhood in Queens.
Right,
Okay, now we are so specific. So now if you introduce Dr. Octopus, I'm sorry, just as I
Green
said,
Goblin.
Green Goblin, thank you. Green
Right,
Goblin, Sandman, all of these characters, they're happening in our city, kind
right,
of. Oh, wow, there's some specifics there. The Baxter building, well, it doesn't really exist, but if it did, it would be on this particular street, and it would look
right.
sort of like that building there. So we started to sort of meld fantasy and reality.
Hmm.
And then again, it became, can you top this? And I think when we go back to the theme of the episode in terms of villains, what is permissible as okay, layering and bringing some depth and more reality, humanity, whatever to a character, and what are we doing for just sensationalistic gimmicks? You mentioned again Barnaby and in the 1930s and that sort of thing. I was going to mention Dr. No in the original James Bond movie, the first James Bond film. Dr. No was I wanted to conquer. I wanted to conquer the government just enough to blackmail them for money.
Right,
And that was pretty much his goal. So he's got this huge plot that he's worked out so that he can manipulate and get money. Goldfinger wasn't much better. Goldfinger
hmm,
was I want to rob Fort Knox and get all the gold the United States has. I'm about money and power, money and power. And at a certain point, you go, okay, I guess that's still just good guys and bad guys. Except what they did with James Bond in Doctor No is up until and that's 1960s, up until that point, your hero, there were certain rules. Your hero did not break. Your hero did not shoot anybody in the back. Your hero did not fire at an unarmed man. Your hero fought and captured and turned people over to the authorities for judge, jury, blah, blah, blah. That's what your heroes did. Your tough detective might take a harder line. He might beat somebody up, but ultimately he's still going to try and capture this person and turn them in. And there's a scene in Doctor No where for a moment I'm going, is James Bond still a hero? Because there's a scene where he captures a guy who came to assassinate him. He captures the guy. The guy's unarmed. The guy's on his knees in front of James, who's sitting in a chair. James questions him to get all the information he can out of the guy, and the guy's smirking because he's basically, I think he's still thinking, I'm working by the rules. So you got me. You'll turn me over to the authority. And James calmly pulls the trigger and shoots him. He doesn't wound him so that he'll be in pain and talk more. He shoots him dead. And
right,
at that point, I remember the audience in the theater that I was in going, oh, because we didn't expect that. That's
right,
our hero. Then someone said out loud, yeah, that's what I do. And I remember thinking in my head, why? Why would you do that? It took me a while to get around to that thought of, well, yeah, otherwise I got to worry that this guy's going to come and get me
right.
later.
Yeah,
And if I'm solo agent, blah, 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 no one's got my back, I better make sure he doesn't come back for it. So again, when you're layering your heroes and your villains, we are talking about villains, but when you're layering your characters, what's their justification for their actions? Why
yeah.
are they doing what they're doing? And then how does that affect those layers?
Well, I mean, there you had that, is James a hero or a villain, right? And you walk out of the theater still talking about that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I mean, I think there was a 20, 30-year conversation about Han Solo. Did he shoot first? Does that make him not well, he's always been, let's say, a shaggy hero at best,
I
right?
think the word they would have used is rogue.
Rogue, yes,
Yes,
yes.
he's a
But
rogue.
you
Yeah.
know, and there's a ton of villains or heroes that are on the villainous side, and
Mhm.
it's what they do and why they do what they do. I mean, look at this guy, the Punisher, right?
Oh, yeah.
And when I read this, I was like, all right, it's Garth Ennis. It's gonna all of the moral underpinnings are gonna be gone. But I was wrong. Garth Ennis held fast to the one thing that makes Frank Castle more than a serial killer. It's this absolute moral code that came from the war, you know? You stop these people who are killing from killing again. And it is severe and it really gives us a lot to question. But that's the thing. When you have to question a character's motives, it reflects on what your beliefs are. And
Yeah.
that's why making a villain more layered makes him more interesting and improves the writing. I want to give another example that is complicated, and
Okay.
then we'll simplify again. I just read this book, and yes, I didn't even consider the book until I heard that it won the Pulitzer, the first horror book that ever won a Pulitzer. It's Daniel Krause's Angel Down. And this is a fascinating read because these loser soldiers are sent out into no man's land between the two trenches in World War One because someone is out there wailing, screaming, right? And it's affecting some people. The main character keeps hearing his name, save me, and his name, right? But they send them out because these are the most disposable. Hell with them. If the Germans shoot them, Bagger is the main character's name, Private Bagger. They want to go help that guy, which is code for put him out of his misery. But when they go, they find an angel. And the rest of the book is trying to protect this angel, figure out, try and reason away. With all the bombs going, did one of the bombs hit, an angel that was there to, I don't know, usher someone to the save, whatever, influence the battle? But now you have this one. And the angel brought out inner things with each of the characters. Most of them villainous, greed, lust, possessiveness. They all wanted something from her, from this angel. The book doesn't have a physical being that is a villain. The villain is war. The villain is the powers who would send humans to war for their own gains and never have to get their hands dirty. The villain is the baggage that these people bring to war that perverts their better angels, pardon the pun. The villain is the insanity, and how does a relatively sane person go through it? I think this is going to wind up being a classic novel on par with On the Waterfront, or not On the Waterfront, All Quiet on the Western Front,
Okay. Yeah.
or one of those, because it does such an amazing job of dealing with good and evil without the archetypes. And Alex, I'm going to tell you one other thing that's got nothing to do with this topic, but it might get some people to say, oh, I got to read this. This book starts in the middle of a sentence and it ends with that sentence not finished. It is
Oh,
all one sentence. Every 3 or 4 lines, there's a little gap. It's broken into chapters, but it is an ongoing, sometimes blurry thought, because the overworked mind of the narrator, who is in no man's land in World War II, can't relax enough to finish a thought.
wow.
Fascinating.
Wow.
And it's another way, I don't think it should be widely used, but the idea of, how do I approach this? How do you approach Darth Maul after Darth Vader, right? Vader was the villain. And they brought in Darth Maul in the prequels, and Lucas got worried that he was going to outshine Maul. I mean, outshine Vader. So
Vader,
he cut
yeah.
him in half and threw him in a pit. But he was so popular, they eventually brought him back in the Clone Wars and all that sort of stuff. And he just had his own series and is becoming a completely different character based on what the glimpse you first saw in that first sequel. And the layers that you see from him make him fascinating.
Well, isn't the same to
Completely
be
different
said?
way.
Can't the same be said for Boba Fett?
Boba Fett. Boba Fett
Boba
is a
Fett,
guy
right?
from the
Yeah,
South. I
Bubba's the
think
guy
I
down at the
think Boba
bar,
Fett
right?
is in Alabama.
Yeah,
He's in
yeah.
there.
Boba Fett is, yeah.
He's
Doesn't
got
he
a
have that fish
moonshine
boat?
business.
In that
Boba
fish
Fett.
boat, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
Boba
Well,
Fett.
Boba Fett, sure.
Yeah.
I would also argue that Darth Vader has become incredibly more layered as the years have gone by. The Obi-Wan series had that amazing couple of confrontations between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, where at one point Obi-Wan, and spoilers if you still haven't seen that, but Obi-Wan apologizes. And Darth Vader is there and they're fighting, and he has shattered some of Vader's helmet. So you see some of the very
Damage.
bruised and
Yeah.
Anakin, and he apologizes to Anakin for everything that's done. He didn't mean to kill him. He didn't mean to crush him. And Vader Anakin says, Obi-Wan, you didn't kill Anakin. I did. And that just, the layers of that.
Hmm.
Where does the young, innocent Anakin, when he goes bad into the dark side in the prequels, when does he decide he'd rather be Darth Vader than Anakin? That creates so many layers. And then when you go back and you see him in what was the Dirty Dozen type movie?
I don't know which one you're referencing.
It fits right before A New Hope.
Oh, see, they lost me for a while.
Oh, this is a fantastic movie, and
If you can't remember, we'll find out later and put it in
yeah,
the
and we'll put it in. And then there was
yeah.
a 2-season series that led up to that movie that leads in. But in seeing all that, what it did was it just added to the frustrations of Vader. So you
Mm.
see Vader. Oh God, I
Well, while
can't
you're
believe
doing
it.
that, while you're thinking and maybe even research, let
Yeah.
me throw in a couple more because we're sort of
Well, yeah.
trying to round off
Well,
here.
what I do is you see him in his all his fury, and then
Right.
you see him in the beginning of New Hope having to contain himself because he's dealing with Princess Leia, and he can't just cut off her head.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I'll look
So
up.
I want to say a couple of things that are coming up here in the conversation, folks, in case you're taking notes, is once again, motivation is a factor, but motivation is a factor of human beings. Why we do what we do when we do it, and to whom. And so, in layering your villains, you really need to know who they are. Just saying, oh, this is a bad person who's going to do this heinous thing or these terrible things or say these awful things, that gives you plot points, but it doesn't give you the characters. And you got to go and check out the character and get to understand why they feel they need to, what is it they want or they're going for, what's the conflict they're wrestling with. These are the things that help impact on how you handle them. And I will just quickly mention, which since we're talking sci-fi here, but I'm going to go to a different series.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the Star
So
Trek series. I'm going to go to the Star Trek series
I'm just gonna
with
fill in this thing so that
with
we can drop Star Wars. It was Rogue One.
Rogue
Before
One.
that was Andor. Now
Okay.
we're done.
Rogue
Go ahead.
One, Sandor. Okay. Khan, who, from the original series, played
Yes.
magnificently by Ricardo Montalban. All right. Basically, he was a super soldier created somewhere in this time period on Earth to fight wars and eventually wound up leading pretty much almost like a cult of his own and became a threat. And so the government had to take him down, and they did. And they eventually shipped these people off so that they would be away from Earth and no longer the great threat. And of course, our people, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise folks, find him, reanimate them, and then they become a threat again. And basically, they're played as if you, I mean, it was an hour-long TV series, an hour-long episode. So within that time frame, we got, okay, super soldier created by the government to do such and thing, to be a force of power and aggression, but now we can't control you, so we got to get rid of you. The throwaway soldiers. And that was the 60s version of talking about war and what we do to soldiers and what war does to soldiers, right? And power play, right? When we are reintroduced to this character years later in the Star Trek movie series, and Kirk meets Khan again, the thing that's changed for his character is that, okay, you dumped us on a planet at the end of that moment back in time, and you said, okay, you can have this planet, you and your people can have this planet, you can have a great life, just stay the hell away from us. And off you rode, never coming back to see how we were doing. And what happened was you put us on a planet that was not really inhabitable. Yeah, we supposedly are super this and we can do that, but no, it was so bad that the love of my life died, that many of my people died, and this is what's left, and now I want your heart. Now I have even more reason to hate your guts. And part of what's happened is, one could say, okay, now it's a revenge story. But let us look at what they then add, that additional layer to that is the pain of being tossed out of my world initially. So Earth sent me out, cast me aside. I finally come back. Okay, I'm given an Eden, and that's taken from me. And I've lost my family. I've lost half of the people that I loved and cared for. And I'm still not anywhere. I don't belong anywhere. And now it's like, instead of trying to assimilate, I want to destroy. I want to watch the world burn. And I want to get even with the people do. And to some degree, feeding on that kind of hate, anger, remorse, pain, twists you and forms an obsession on one factor, and that's what he goes for. And it's that obsession that he's now a prisoner of that leads to his own destruction. It's less of what Kirk does to take him out and more of the hate just consumes him to the point of where he actually winds up setting himself up to die, even though he may not be seeing it that way.
And you can add another layer in that, CT Alpha 5, I think, was the name of the planet. And when they originally find him in Con 2, they're arguing that no, because this is a desolate, horrible planet. And there was the Russian on the Chekhov is saying, no, we put you and SETI Alpha 5. It was a beautiful vibe. This is SETI Alpha 5. SETI Alpha, what, a 4 or something, exploded, knocked them out off orbit, and you never checked on us.
Right.
Right? You put us here so that we could live our own lives, and you never checked on us. It was partially your responsibility to monitor how we're doing. You're supposed to be the Federation. It was a great subplot or layer to his villainy that he was righteously offended that those who he cooperated with, yeah, we'll live here. Fine. We'll live here. Didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And
again.
And in the 60s, that was applicable to, say, the Vietnam War or the Nixon presidency or whatever. But, that movie was made in the 80s, and it had a whole different resonance. There you go. But here we are in 2026, and anyone who's listening to that can say, pick your headline. Right? Yeah. Pick your headline, from the reflecting pool to the prisons, the private prisons, or whatever. There's a lot of things you can say, well, that's applicable too. And that's when you have a really great layered villain where you can understand their evil, You can understand why you would categorize them, or we collectively would categorize them as a villain. But then you also say, there's a point there, and that's why Khan is continuously fascinating. Thanos in the movies, I loved Thanos in Starling's Marvel comics, but he killed half the universe as a present to the girl he was obsessed with, who happened to be Death, right? Here in the films, he did it out of a desire to preserve all of life, rationalizing that the worlds that he knew of, the universes, the galaxies he knew of, were critically overpopulated, and that they couldn't sustain, and that if he was the only one strong enough to save everybody, he would, by eliminating half. Now, I think the Russo brothers screwed it up because they said that half of every living thing dies, which would be half the animals, half the crops. I think what Thanos, my understanding of Thanos, was half the human lives or bipodal thinking lives, then there would be plenty of animals for meat eaters, plenty of crops. You'd have twice as much to go around. And I always took that logical through line. And if you look at that, yes, Thanos is villainous to the point of insanity. And right next, a razor thin border, right next to that insanity is a gross logic, hard, cold logic. There are overpopulation situations. Our planet is, especially if we're not going to pay any attention to it, is going to run out of resources. And Thanos was saying, that's gonna be far worse than what I'm doing. And it creates an opportunity for fascinating reflection and discussion, and something that resonates with you and stays with you and makes you think of your own beliefs and your own morals. And that's when you know you got a hell of a villain.
And not one that can be easily forgotten and ignored. And that is what we were going for in this particular discussion.
So now you know your homework.
Yes.
Go create your own
great
Thanos.
people.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll give you 22 minutes. No.
And you'll give us the news, right? Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We hope you got something out of this. We love to just kind of ramble around and get to the point at the end. But that is what you should be thinking about with your bad guys, with your villains, whatever gender they are.
Or life forms.
What's right? What's wrong? What do they believe? What's their background? What's making them do what they do? All of that stuff deepens your characters.
Yeah.
The deeper your characters are, the more fascinating your story. And that story is yours and yours alone to tell. So go and tell your story, tell your damn story, and enrich the whole world. Okay. There you go.
Thank you, folks. By the way, since he gave that great little ending point there, I will just simply say, please, if you found any of and all of this useful and wonderful and inspiring, and subscribe, because we'll be coming back again next time with even more good stuff.
Yes, but it won't be 420, bro. Yeah.
No, right. And you won't have that huge, whatever that thing was. It's just, Okay, folks, you take care. And Chris, as always, a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, even on 420.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.